Modernity and the Holocaust was in a way a watershed work of mine. It moved me onto a road which I haven't finished till this very day, and probably will never finish, and that's the um, study of conditions of ethics, morality under changing historical circumstances. Uh, what struck me when I was working on modernity and the Holocaust was not the issue that cruel things are done by cruel people. That's a commonplace idea, really trivial, known to everybody, and even I would say not particularly frightening, because every kind of society develops all sorts of half-effective means to deal with monsters, with cruel people, with people with predilection to inhumanity. We have all sorts of ways of dealing with them, like lunatic asylums, prisons, uh, uh, ideological indoctrination, brainwashing, all sorts of things. Even sociology is part of the exercise in this respect, to sift the normality from abnormality, to condemn abnormality and warn people don't be abnormal, don't deviate, and so on. Right. So that's not particularly discovery, and not particularly disturbing news, if it is news. Uh, and besides, history of cruelty is as long as history of human species, and there's nothing particularly novel in our times about some people doing cruel things to some other people. What was, however, a, I don't know whether it is discovery, probably not my own, but my experience derived from the study of the story of the Holocaust was that really frightening, really dangerous, really problematic, and urgent to be dealt with is the problem how it happens that ordinary people, perfect neighbors, very helpful neighbors, and ideal husbands, caring fathers, how under certain circumstances they can be involved in doing what they are doing, in participating in monstrous deeds, not being monsters themselves. Uh, what was the most shattering thing I learned from Hannah Arendt's book, for example, about Eichmann in Jerusalem, was that all highest rank psychiatrists and psychologists who were engaged by the government of Israel to study the personality of Adolf Eichmann and pronounce on his ability to carry responsibility for his deeds, all of them were of one opinion that from every daily, from the point of view of every daily criterion of propriety and, uh, well, the righteousness or whatever, Eichmann could be considered to be an exemplary person. Uh, well, I live in this little cul-de-sac. We know all our neighbors know each other very well. I know them all. They know me all. We always bow to each other and greet each other and ask, how was the day and what are you doing, and things like that. But if Eichmann was one of them, I could live with him all the time without having an inkling what he is doing in his office time, really. That's the frightening news. And what I found, what I convinced myself to be the case anyway, It is, I admit, contentious and not accepted by quite a few readers, but that modernity is actually a grandmaster in achieving this feat, in mobilizing, engaging, harnessing ordinary, mildly moral, mildly ethical people into the collective production of quite unthinkable atrocities. So that was why it was a watershed in my life work.
How big a watershed was the book for you personally and professionally? Was the realization about neighbours the thing, or was the effect on your professional work the big thing?
Well, I found my vocation in a sense. I was a round-of-the-mill sociologist before that, and I just followed the logic of the discipline in a sense. And so there were novelties, change of interest, movement in this direction, that direction. I tried to follow it, to be up to date, and to catch up with, to be able to convey them, to start with, to my students, and they had to be well informed. Remember, that was the time when you couldn't go to the nearest corner shop and buy yourself a software for computer which contains all the latest news of everything, about everything. Teacher was still the gatekeeper of knowledge, in a sense, and, the source of it. And I think from the trilogy, I call it modern trilogy, which three books which succeeded each other in a relatively short time. It was Legislators and Interpreters, that was the first book, the second was Modernity and the Holocaust, and the third was Modernity and Ambivalence. That set the stage, which I never left since then. And I just became one topic sociologist in a sense. And to me, it is one topic, in spite of the fact that in order to investigate this topic, you have to wander around the whole of human life and all aspects of it, really, to find all its ramification, which in the end, somewhere, all these loose strings probably can be tied up. I won't do it, and I don't have time left to do it. But so I was busy following the strings rather than tying them together. So the interplay of these two things, the methodology which I developed in the course of this study on the other side of the watershed, which I called sociological hermeneutics. Don't confuse it with hermeneutical sociology. Hermeneutical sociology is just one kind of sociology, but sociological hermeneutics is my view of how sociology should be done. So it should try to understand what's going on in the world as the projection of the strategies which people follow. So from the facts of the matter, you go back to the attitudes, the perceptions, the intentions, the motivations, the strategies which people develop, being rational beings, in response to the conditions, extant conditions, conditions in which they found themselves. So, untie this knot, this Gordian knot. People say it can't be untied, it has to be cut. But I'm trying to do whatever I can, I don't can much, to untie it, to try to see how it all comes really together. And I think that I stayed on this road for the last more than 20 years already, quite consistently. That's why I call it a watershed. The central problem, of course, is for me, was and is the chances of ethics understood in Emmanuel Levinas terms. Ethics as the care of the other, not self-centered, not self-directed, not self-referential, but oriented toward the other. What are the chances of ethics under changing conditions of our society? Already in the book called Modernity and Ambivalence, I came to the conclusion that something very important happened in the history of modernity as described in the book Modernity and the Holocaust. Namely, we are still living in modern times. We are probably more modern than our ancestors used to be, but we are modern without typical illusions of modernity. All these illusions of modernity were that there are accidents, there are strange things, there are contingencies, there are things unpredictable, unpleasant, and so on, but they are all temporary irritants with due effort and a little bit of time extra. We will get rid of them. Therefore, dealing seriously with such awkward things as ambivalences, ambiguities, cohabitation with strangers, is a waste of time. It's a waste of time because, as I repeat, they are temporary irritants. Tomorrow they will be non-existent. So what for? We should invest time and effort into cracking these mysteries if they are already doomed to death, and to rather fast death. Modernity was convinced that if there are 1,000 problems which are still there to be resolved, and if you resolve one problem, then only 999 will remain. And eventually, following this logic, we will arrive to the unproblematic existence, when there will be nothing no thorns left in our body, and we can just enjoy the life, and very much like Fukuyama would prematurely announce that we have already done it. There's nothing left to be done, really. So that was the illusion of modernity, and why I jumped to the concept of postmodernity. I think it was an unfortunate decision, but I didn't have a better idea at that time. Because I thought that we are bracing ourselves for the first time to living with differences, with strangers, with ambivalences, ambiguities, irrationalities, permanently. And therefore they become very valid and very urgent objects for scrutiny, research, some sort of theorizing, making them comprehensible, and so on. I call now our present era, as you probably know, liquid modernity. Liquid modernity because it melts the entities, all sorts of entities, the patterns of behavior, the fashions, the forms of cohabitation, the popular customs, habits, quicker, faster than they are able to gel. So everything remains in the liquid state without solidifying. Melting of structures, melting of patterns was a pastime, favorite pastime of modernity from the very start. With one, however, difference, very important one, that the classic modernity, the early modernity, 19th century, up to the half of the 20th century, people considered melting as a temporary pastime. They melted the solids not because they were solid and they disliked solids. On the contrary, they melted the solids because they dreamed of solid, stable, secure existence. And they considered the existing solids not solid enough. So they melted them in order to construct better solids to withstand the winds of history, the flows of time, and things like that. Of course, they failed because, however solid structures they managed to build, none of them proved to be as long-lasting as Gothic cathedrals, for example, not to mention eternal. In our times, however, I think the mood has changed. People fear solidity. People fear fixity. They don't want to make things more solid. They want rather to keep them flexible as much as possible, just to not to overlook, not to lose, not to bypass any opportunity, any chance which will appear in the future. So the ambivalence, ambiguity, being on a crossroads, being in the fluid environment, swimming or rather surfing, that is the modern expression, the favorite way of transportation, surfing, going on the surface, not dipping down, I think it's increasingly accepted as the perpetual way of life, as the way the world is.
Do you like the way the world is?
Well, you see, whether I like it or not, I try to make as immaterial as possible because I specialize in, by I don't know, by genetically formed or by nature or by nurture or by character. I am a critical sociologist, so I came to the conclusion really fairly early that every way of human cohabitation has its positive aspects, its achievements, and its vices, its banes, which make it uncomfortable. 70 years ago, Zygmunt Freud wrote the book Civilization and Its Discontents. In the book he explained that all the unhappiness of contemporary men or women comes from the fact that we have surrendered a lot of our freedom of behavior for the sake of gaining more security. If Sigmund Freud was giving you an interview now, he would probably repeat what he said then, that civilization is an exchange, a trade-off. You give something away, you get something instead. But he would reverse the order of exchange. He would say the unhappiness of today's people comes from the fact that they have surrendered quite a lot of their security, social security, existential security, security of social position, security of their future and so on, for the sake of virtually unprecedented and almost unlimited freedom of following their instincts and their wishes, their desires, their lusts, their whims, their caprices, whatever. So if you ask me which society is happier, I won't be able to answer because uh, how can you answer this, even begin to answer this question over the heads of people who were involved in one society and the other? If you asked contemporaries of Freud, they would certainly say that if only we get more freedom and get rid of this excess of security, how wonderful society would be. If you ask contemporary people, they more and more often, I see it's trend already well advanced, would answer, oh, if only we got a little bit more certainty, security, and solid soil under our feet, and we are ready to surrender quite a lot of our hard-won. They don't remember that they were hard-won because they were not there when it happened. Hard-won liberties. And people are more than eager now to surrender their liberties in exchange for more promised security. So how can you compare? Every kind of society has its own fears, has its own nightmares, and has its own dreams and its own hopes. And they are not comparable.
The freedoms that we have, the chance to move around, the options available to us, but you don't include within that framework, I assume, the stranger, the people you were talking about who don't have that, who are in some ways increasing in number and are under more threat. So how do they fit
Well, that's
into
a
this?
new challenge. Strangers are plentiful, and besides what's happened last year, another tremendously important watershed, not in my private life, but in the history of humanity. For the first time in history, majority of humans live in cities, in big cities. So it's tremendous change, and that means that most of humanity experiences, which are reflected upon, drawn conclusions from, and recycled into life strategies, are urban experiences. An urban experience means living permanently, day by day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day among strangers. And again, to return to what we were talking about before, that was not treated as a serious problem in solid modernity, because then the guiding idea was the idea of melting pot or assimilation. You are a stranger, you are a newcomer, you are an immigrant, you speak different language, you follow different lifestyle. It's temporary irritant again, because sooner or later, thanks to Academy of Language, thanks to teaching one unified curriculum of history to all children in all schools of the country, introducing one national calendar of holidays and getting rid of this provincial, local, parochial, memories. All that will bring us to a uniformed, uniformized nation. So living with strangers is an interval. Is a road towards something. It is not a condition, a permanent condition. Today we have a different kind of migration going on in the world. Migration is again a constant feature of modern living, because of two essential industries of modern industries. One is industry of order, the other is industry of economic progress. Both crucial industries of modern times, order building and economic progress, have that in common, that they produce a lot of redundant people, unwanted, unneeded, uh, order building creates what I call the human refuse, people who don't fit into the order you want to build. All order building means selecting people into useful plants and weeds. And otherwise there would be no order building at all. That's the only real, genuine idea behind it. So you produce a lot of people who can't find room for themselves in the new and improved version of order, and they are forced to emigrate, go away, or escape the persecution or whatever. And the other is economic progress, which consists in learning the art of doing the same things you have done before, only with less expenditure and less labor. Again, you produce this time not human refuse, but human reject.
Malthus was talking about overpopulation and the need to get rid of the poor and stop them breeding. Yeah. Is this really so new?
In all eras, apart from liquid modernity, the poor people, the indolent people, the invalids, and so on, the beggars, had their assigned place. They were part of society, without which society would be unable to live. In pre-modern times, they were the God-sent gift to all of us, because thanks to the care of the poor, we could earn salvation in heaven, right? And people who were very, very concerned with the fate of their soul, which was declared to be eternal, and their life time on earth was the only chance to earn heaven, for the eternity in heaven rather than eternity in hell. Well, people welcomed the presence of beggars on every church footsteps, because they could earn some brownie points for their eternal life. If you take solid modernity, the poor people, the redundant people, were precious. They were reserve army of labor. As you know, solid modernity measured its well-being by bulk, by the size. The bigger the better. The larger the factory, the better. The more powerful the engine, the better, and so on. And the more people, the better, because people were used, the ordinary people were used as prospective workers, which are increasing the wealth of the nation, and prospective soldiers, which are increasing the size of the possessions of the nation. There was a panic at the beginning of 20th century in Britain when the recruiting commissions found great majority, actually, of called to the army people for Boer War, for the Boer War, incapable of withstanding the trials and tribulation of soldiers' life. They were underfed, they were poorly educated, they were physically weak, and so on. There was a virtual panic. And eugenics, among other things, was created at that time, to which you referred on another occasion, precisely motivated by this idea of making people healthier, better fed, better educated, sheltered, and so if people temporarily unfit to work, temporarily unfit of for military service, were reserve army of labor. They were needed. You employed them. The idea was the full employment, and everybody being a potential conscript. Now, if that was the case, then every general will tell you that the reservists should be taken proper care of because they are tomorrow soldiers in active service. Investment in their well-being was a good investment in national interest. The issue of taking care of them was, as Anthony Giddens would say, beyond left and right. Everybody agreed, yes, it's a good thing to take care that our poor are not as poor, that they are not as indolent.
I'll take you back a little bit more, if I may. From Malthus onwards, you had the worry, the fear of overpopulation, that the world didn't have enough resources. This country relied on emigration, or it relied on enclosures and forcing people off the land, or in the Irish case of letting them starve. So we're not dealing with something very new, are we? It's the idea that there's a surplus population and you've got to get rid of it.
Both Malthus and anti-Malthusianism was the parochial concern of one small bit of the planet, which was already modernized, Europe. And all around, in South America, in North America, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, there were empty lands. There were some natives, running around the bushes, but the land was virgin. It was unused. It could be put to the right, proper use. Between 50 to 60 million people left Europe in 19th century in order to colonize, this faraway land. That is over because empty lands don't exist any longer, and there is not even a chance for us to contemplate that we can make them empty. It doesn't work. We don't have resources. Even if you wanted to exterminate them, we won't be able to, and so on. And the migration today is following the pattern which I called the empire migrates back. We have created empires, we Europeans, and we migrated to our empire. Now the empire period is over and they migrate back to their former metropolis. To follow the recently died Levis Strauss, he spoke about two ways known in history of dealing by people with the strangers. One, he said, was anthropophagic, and the other anthropoemic. Anthropophagic means eating them, making them part of our own body. You can eat them literally, being a cannibal, or you can eat them culturally by annihilating their difference. They become part of our own society. They are Frenchmen, they are Germans, they are Spaniards, they are no longer strangers. Right? And the other anthropoemic, which means vomiting them. Now, none of the two versions is available any longer. So we are in a pretty pickle, as I say, really, because we have to invent new ways of cohabitation with strangers, which cannot resolve to this safety valves of anthropophagic or anthropoemic patterns. Which means that from the era of assimilation, we have arrived to the present era, which I provisionally call the diasporic era of diasporas. The strangers are among us, but they are not here to assimilate. In order even to posit the idea of assimilation, you need to have in mind and make it real the hierarchy between cultures. You can sensibly assimilate from a lower culture to a higher culture. But if there is no hierarchy of culture, if we live in a liquid modern world, if every difference requires loudly recognition, and every difference is gladly granted such a recognition just to get rid of the trouble, just for the sake of tranquility. If that's the case, then there is no meaning in the idea of assimilation. Why should one assimilate? So the big cities, which I mentioned, in which majority of humanity lives currently, are the places in which strangers are bound to interact daily without losing their strangehood, without stopping being strangers. Their interaction is no longer a road leading to sooner or later uniformization. They are retaining their strangers, they see strangehood, they see no reason to change it, to renounce it. And they are bound to carry some sort of double loyalty. When I speak about diasporas, I should have said archipelago of diasporas and crisscrossing archipelagos of diasporas. I don't know, Ugandan Asian who lives somewhere in Elephant and Castle in London. Well, it's part of the social body of where he lives, of England, of Britain, in more general terms. At the same time, he's part of the scattered all over the world diaspora of Ugandan Indians. It's not clear where his children, for example, should study, or whether his children should open their businesses, where they should settle, and so on. There are more and more families who have their members scattered all over the globe. So there are vertical and horizontal ties connecting them in all directions. That's the new situation, and we are learning slowly the art of doing it. And I must admit, quite optimistic about the outcome.
You're pessimistic or
Optimistic about the outcome. For the following reason, that these big cities are the dustbin into which globalization disposes of its own consequences, problems which it created but is unable to resolve. And migration is one of them. Migration is caused by global reasons. It's not a local phenomenon, it's a global reason. But Leeds City Council must deal with the consequences, must resolve the issue, must provide for the conditions in which all these variegated people, following different faiths, different lifestyles, carrying different historical memories, speaking slightly different languages, how they can live together.
All these people that nobody wants are coming to these cities, and the cities have to deal with them.
Yeah.
Why? How can you be optimistic with that as the
Well,
scenario?
may I repeat? On the one hand, the contemporary cities are the dustbins for the globally created problems. They have to deal with the consequences here on the spot. In case of migration, in case of pollution, in case of clean water, in case of transportation, everything virtually. Problems globally created, locally needed to be tried to be resolved. So on the one hand, it's a question of local forces, voluntary forces, the governmental or self-governmental forces, or just the everyday practices conducted inadvertently, without reflection, without thinking, just by dealing with the neighbors, going to the same school, sitting at the same meetings, and so on, in which the new forms of behavior and interaction are experimented with, put into test, and some of them are revealed to be very felicitous and resolving quite a lot of problems. So it's a double aspect of city life today. On the one hand, we are living in a dustbin of global problems. On the other hand, we are a huge laboratory in which the new ways of cohabitation are daily played, experimented, invented, abandoned, replaced, and so on and so on. Huntington famously wrote about the crash of civilization coming. From the point of view of residents, say, of Chapeltown, which is very mixed cultural idea of Leeds, it doesn't look like clash of civilization. It looks like problems between neighbors, and the problems between neighbors, unlike clash of civilization, are eminently negotiable. You can talk, you can quarrel, and every quarrel contains seeds of agreement. So you can, finally come to satisfactory modus vivendi. Going beyond mere situation in which we can live together peacefully despite our differences. Beyond that, going towards discovery that we are actually benefiting from our differentiation. There's more ideas, more patterns of life, interesting, enjoyable, and so on, so on. Like we actually gain from being different. The uniformity, the sameness, is not after all that attractive as it might have seemed to be. But I, of course, want to qualify what I said about being optimistic, because that's only one possibility, and there is, of course, the other possibility. I call these two coexisting tendencies in city life mixophobia and mixophilia. On the one hand, we resent the strangers, as always humans did, because strangers are the carriers of uncertainty, unpredictability, insecurity, and so on. And manifestation of mixophobia is the tendency, very pronounced in contemporary cities, to hide yourself behind the walls of gated community, so that you are not so much resolve the problem of living with strangers, but you just cancel the problem by separating yourself from strangers. That doesn't push things forward a little bit even, because the more you are separating yourself, the less you have skill of talking, conversing, negotiating, compromising, whatever. And that's quite a pronounced one of the two tendencies. The other is mixophilia. Mixophilia means simply enjoying variety. And if you look at what's happening in the same Leeds after dark, in the area where all the pubs and nightclubs, and other entertainment places are. You see the floods of youth of all colors, all languages, all ways of behaving, all kinds of dressing and so on, mixing together, talking to each other, singing together, dancing together. Then you see the mixophilia at work. People actually enjoying that. They leave their homes because at home everybody is dull, boringly the same, absolutely predictable. Nothing may happen, there's no adventure there. And out there, you expose yourself.
Could you not have said the same thing about Yugoslavia, that people were mixing? Could you not see the same things about Jews in Germany? What is different? Why do you think that it's going to work out? Everything would suggest that there will be flashpoints and that the flashpoints could be absolutely terrible and could have just as easily erupt into flames because people can't assimilate, because they have their own values which they won't give up. And in the end, those values are a stronger push than going out for a good night out.
Look, we are now in the realm of prophecy. I'm not a prophet, perhaps you are, but I'm not. I frankly admit I am not. I think it's guessing. Your guess is as good as mine. Mine is as good as yours. I don't know what will happen. You probably will yet see what is going to happen in the next 20 years. I won't for sure because I'm 84. So you are in a better position to retrospectively reassess our conversation. But the difference between events which you referred to, and quite rightly, you have summed up them very well, and the present situation is forces me to return to what I already said, that all these problems of living elbow to elbow with strangers were considered by Soviet modernity as temporary irritants, which can be radically resolved.
One of your sociological colleagues said Bauman's reflection on ethics are underpinned by a sharp distinction between ethics and morality. I want to know, what are those sharp distinctions?
Ethics was the idea that you can actually codify the rules of morality, that uncertainty as to the way of behaving is the arch enemy of morality. In order to make people moral, you need two things. First, to complete a comprehensive code of behavior on every occasion which people may encounter. And secondly, to make people, induce people to learn by heart what is there in the code, and then obey. Ethics saw morality after the pattern of law. There are paragraphs which you need to learn, and if you depart from any of them, you are punished. Morality, as I understand it, and here I follow as closely as I can the inspiration of Emmanuel Levinas. On the contrary, contrary to ethics, thrives under conditions of uncertainty. Uncertainty is the home ground of morality, and hence, again, my optimism that after the age of ethics, we may be heading towards age of morality. Now, why it is so? Why uncertainty is so crucial? Because it confronts us directly with the issue of unconditional responsibility, which I bear as much as everybody else, but I always a bit more than everybody else, which means that a bit more because even if anybody else doesn't do anything about this case of injustice, it doesn't excuse me. I can't recall their inactivity as my justification. My responsibility is always greater. Now, when you are cast in condition of uncertainty, then what you have to do is to translate this unconditional responsibility into the language of practical undertakings, what I can do, what I should do. Therefore, the morality is not a recipe for happy life. On the contrary, it is a recipe for very hard, very difficult life, for guilty conscience, for constant uncertainty whether what I have done was enough, whether I shouldn't do something else or more than I have done, and so on, so on. Constant dissatisfaction, constant guilty conscience, and so on. So it is not a recipe for happiness. If you are looking for happiness, better forget about morality. The happiest people are people who are completely indifferent, cool-blooded, and uncaring. Probably they are. I don't know that from autopsy, but I presume it could be the case. So that's roughly the distinction. Ethics, understood in the sense as I suggested, does not breed morality. It breeds conformity, letter following, obedience to the commandment. There are two stories in the Bible about the origins of morality. One is God expelling Adam and Eve from paradise. What instructions he gave them on farewell. Remember, he told Adam, you get your bread in sweat and toil, and to Eve, he said, you give birth in pain, right? Nothing more. It was the only instruction. Go and live, create your life. And then came some specifications, Cain was still asking, bewildered, am I my brother's keeper? He never heard about it at all. Why do I deserve wrath of God? I'm not my brother's keeper. He wanted justification for being his brother's keeper, or the explicit command to do so. And then, as if in response, comes the second story of origins of humanity, the laws which Moses brought from the Mount Sinai, and they are very specific. Not just 10 commandments, but all these orders. What to do if you borrow an ox from your neighbor and something happens to eye of the ox. Bible is full of them. It occupies 37 pages of very, very small print, really. And that's the beginning of ethics. The exact instruction what to do on every occasion. Emmanuel Levinas recalled famous Hobbes' idea that society is a contraption which enables us to live together at peace, cutting down on our awful instincts, right? Otherwise, if not for society, not power of society, not the frame, iron frame of society, our life, as we remember, would be nasty, brutish, and short. That is Hobbes' explanation of the necessity of society. Levinas wonders whether it's not the other way around, whether society is really contraption to make uh, us make the life livable in spite of our murderous instincts, or whether society is a contraption to make our life livable in spite of unconditionality of our responsibility. With unconditionality of responsibility, only the saints can live. Ordinary people like you and me can't. That is suspicion of Emmanuel Levinas. So, society tries to cut down this unlimited, unconditional responsibility to human size, to ordinary human size, and therefore replaced, in my language, I switched to my language, replaced morality with ethics. Learn your ethics and you can sleep quietly, and to the nightmares and to the guilty conscience. Still there are some untied strings left, certainly, because no ethics can contain the complete, absolutely complete prescription, list of prescriptions. So there will be some, but basically, essentially, you can proceed, you can live every day. And on this basis, really, I made this distinction between ethics and morality. Morality is unconditional and therefore not only difficult to live with, but virtually for ordinary people who are not saints, impossible. So, if everybody behaved like saints, there will be only martyrs without posterity, and humanity probably wouldn't exist. What ethics does is, while still brandishing the ideal of morality, it surreptitiously cut it down to the realm, limited realm of human possibilities.
I don't know whether I'm stealing your words, but I think you said genocide is an integral part of the grand design. What makes you say that genocide is an integral part of the grand design?
Grand design was the inextricable, inalienable aspect of modern ambition. We wanted, not we, our ancestors wanted to remake the world after design. Get rid, Le Corbusier wanted to destroy Paris because it was, chaotically, nastily built, and in its place built a new town, new city by design. Absolutely rational, absolutely sanitized, absolutely adjusted to every lofty human need. But that was only one example related to Paris. Hitler wanted to remake the world as a whole, and so did Stalin. That was the ambition. That was the extremes, but ingrained in the very way of being modern is modernization, which replaces reality with something made in the on the drawing boards. Our former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, most popular word, probably if you counted all his speeches, that would emerge as the most commonly used, was the word modernization. He wanted to modernize everything. Everything was earmarked for replacement sooner or later. So that's, genocide, Hitler genocide, the Holocaust, was part of the larger plan, which is not often enough discussed, of Übersiedlung, he wanted to transport the whole populations from the place they occupy by the whim of history, accident of history, into places where they could be more usefully deployed by the ruling German race. So the Poles were to be transported away, further east because they occupied land too close to for German farmers. There was a grand plan. Hundreds and thousands of high-class experts in economics, in geography, in demography, in transportation were employed in order to draw all this grand design of the new world, 1,000 years long Reich, right? If he didn't lose the war.
You've described, I think, globalization as a predator of nation states, and you've moved into a suggestion that I think we need a global law that is binding, a global law that must be a real law and should be obeyed. That seems a long way from morality. That seems to be taking us back to ethics.
We are not discussing about morality, we are discussing law. And seeing morality after the pattern of law is really the greatest mistake which ethically inspired moralists of 19th century were thinking. I reject it. I think that conscience is the most demanding court of law thinkable. And if you will be acquitted without any problem, even without paid over your nose lawyer defending you, if you be acquitted by a court of law of your guilt, you still may be condemned by your conscience. Morality is not like law. Morality, I already told you, is based on unconditional responsibility. I am responsible for your well-being without limits. That is what morality demands. No law would dare to put such a demand to anybody. On the contrary, whatever does not appear in a paragraph of law is not recognized as a crime. Whatever is not proscribed is allowed. You can do whatever is not spelled out as a crime. There is no such comfortable limitation in the case of morality. Well, morality could be pushed as far away, as say risking your own life in favor of in order to preserve the life of the other. No law would dare to require something like that. Only dictators and violators of law might tell you, you should give your life for your king. Now, but even that could not be enthroned in the books of law. Long ago, there was a fashion, short-lived fashion, hopefully, of hijacking planes, remember? And newspapers wrote profusely about it. Each hijacking was a sensation. There was full of interviews with the victims of that and so on and so on. No one, however, was interested after a few days about them. Our contemporary culture is a culture of forgetting, not of remembering. Only one journalist from Le Monde came to a felicitous idea that to visit, after 20 years, to visit people, couples, which were together victims of the same hijacking. Much to his astonishment and to my astonishment and to my gratitude, because it opened my eyes to certain problem, he found out that among these couples, the incidence of divorce was extremely high. I don't remember exact figure, but it was exorbitantly high. And he tried to find out why. Because, well, the answer he got was that I thought that former wife, my husband, was such a brave and caring and well-organized man. I saw him suddenly crawling on his knees and begging for pity and things like that. The other said he was all for his family, nothing for himself, and now I saw how he was stealing the tastiest bit of the skimpy food which we were given and things like that. My addition to it is that if they were not by accident victims of this hijacking, they would live happily ever after, never worrying about this sort of thing. Circumstances, I don't know, revealed or created, discovered or invented, it's difficult to say, but aspects which otherwise not just will be hidden, that's our guess that they are there but hidden. But perhaps the aspects will be never born, if not this impact.
You're on record, and you obviously feel it from our talk, that humans are by nature moral. Your stand. How is it possible to believe that in a post-Darwin, post-Holocaust, genocide-ridden world? How
Yes,
is it
but
possible?
again, being moral means knowing the difference between good and evil. In this sense, they are by nature moral. We all have the notion of that there is good and there is evil, and some inkling of how to set apart one from the other. It doesn't mean being moral that you will invariably select good from evil. That would be even impossible given the unconditional nature of responsibility. So whatever good you are doing, it is always good enough. So it's always tinged and contaminated with some dose of evil. So being moral does not mean being a goody, doing always goody things. It simply means being aware there is a problem, because there is good and there is evil, and you have to select. Full stop. Being moral doesn't necessarily mean that you are good. Mind you, to go back to Eichmann. In terms of daily morality, he was a moral man.
Sorry, was Eichmann a moral man?
In terms of daily morality, in terms of morality which does not take into account trains going to Treblinka and gas chambers and barbed wires of Auschwitz and so on, he was a moral man. What is required of moral men exposed only to normal daily life? Be kind to and helpful to your neighbor, be loving to your wife, be caring of your children, and help the blind man to cross the road. In these terms, Eichmann was 100% moral person. He knew what is good, what is bad, and as much as he could, he tried to do good things. He was never caught kicking the blind man instead of helping him the other way. On the other way, he was never known to filling his stomach while his children were hungry, and he was never known to be unfriendly to his neighbors. There came some certain circumstances. That's the point I am trying to make for the last 20-odd years. Unfortunately, I get confirmation day by day that it doesn't get through. I am unfit to the task.
I would say to you that Eichmann was unkind to his neighbour. He was in a neighbour where a whole lot of people were delivered to him, and he was quite happy to see them go up the flue.
No, they were not neighbors. No.
They're not neighbours.
No,
Who are they then? Strangers?
going back to Levinas, the society is a contraption which allows you to live with in company of morality. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive. One of the stratagems which are used by this contraption called society is that they draw the boundaries around the universe of moral obligations. What is beyond the boundary is not embraced by moral obligation. And I'm terribly sorry, but if you read Modernity and the Holocaust, and you will see that it all started from excluding the Jews from the realm of moral obligations. They were not neighbors any longer, they were Jews. Once you put the stamp on the passport, big J, Jude, then they are simply excluded. You are no longer, your unconditional morality is made short of one condition, namely, not every human is a human being and an object of moral responsibility. And spectacularly so, Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, mental retarded are not. Giorgio Agamben dug up from ancient Roman law the idea of homo sacer. Homo sacer was an institution in the ancient Roman law, a man who can be killed without punishment, but who can't be used in religious sacrifice. So he is excluded simultaneously from human laws and from divine laws, beyond what? Beyond anything, really. Morality, your moral responsibility stopped when you come to disorder. So to speak that the Jews were his neighbors, he would understand you.
Would they
are
have
not
been?
neighbors. Are swines in the pigsty over there your neighbors?
But if the ethics, if the laws had been drawn, you say it was a question of exclusion. If the laws said they are your neighbours, would they have been his neighbours? Would he have been any different?
If there were no Nuremberg laws, only laws of neighborhood, which say that every resident of the Nazi Germany is your neighbor, and you love your neighbor like yourself, I'm quite sure that there would be no Auschwitz. So either or. So, I don't see any problem here, really.
No,
I don't know why you see that there's a problem.
Well,
To my satisfaction, I have clarified to myself long ago.
okay.
Since Modernity and the Holocaust, we are returning again to this book, where I found out that I can learn enormous amount of things from historians, theologians, philosophers, but nothing at all from sociologists. They have nothing to say about it. Since then, I virtually stopped talking or writing to sociologists. So I am very unsociological sociologist. And there are probably quite a few sociologists who wouldn't count me among the mates.
A lot of your later writing doesn't seem to be about sociology at all. You seem to be inhabiting a different sort of arena to most sociologists.
Well, I'm one of the so-called founding fathers of sociology, Georg Simmel, never was given any university position in his life. Well, he was given 1 year before his death. It's only because the First World War broke and suddenly there was shortage of teaching staff in the university, so he was given a chair in Strasbourg. And that was his actually luck, because being detached from university life, not being obliged to write for peer reviews and care about promotion and things like that, he could do what he thought and write what he thought. That's why he's the only founding father of sociology who is absolutely topical. You can read, what he said, and just follow the pattern and just start from there. So being a member of academic sociology is a very mixed blessing. It provides you perhaps with mundane success, but at the same time cut your wings. Mixed blessing and mixed is a curse. Anyway, I keep repeating now that I advise all my friends to retire from university as soon as possible, and tell all my enemies to stay there as long as possible. So that's my answer. Beyond that, I don't go. If you don't think it's sociology, call it kakareko. I don't care really. I know what I'm doing, and I think that I believe in the need of what I'm doing. Therefore, I don't regret that I've selected sociology as my